and happy Wednesday to the world out there. And today, it's just one gentleman with me, Mr. Zeb. How's it going?
I'm good, Sam. How you doing?
Are you 40-3 good, or are you like 9-4 good?
I'm 9-4 good. I think 40-3 versus those Jets feels a lot more like 21-14.
Were you worried when they were driving on that first drive? 6 consecutive drives they scored in their past 6 games. That's what it said on the TV screen, and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this isn't something to worry about because they couldn't score after that. But it was fun.
I was worried until they mentioned that stat, and then I was like, oh, okay, well, this is just what they do.
Right, because they just lose. Exactly. Was it weird knowing that at almost no point you had to worry about a comeback, or you had to worry like, oh, we're playing good now, but wait until the third quarter. I mean, they did miss 3 field goals, so the score was not necessarily indicative of what the final score was, because they could have been 40-12, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could have been, but
it wasn't.
Turns out it wasn't, and even if it had been, I'd have been perfectly okay with that, and probably still not have been worried at any point.
It's interesting because I look at the Seahawks and I see them play against like the starters, and I have a really good idea of how they're going to do. But in previous games, like the San Francisco game and that Giants game, and now we have the upcoming Washington game, we might be going up against a backup. And I feel like the Seahawks, for whatever reason, are a little bit less good against a backup as opposed to like an actual starter. I don't know is that something you've ever felt?
I mean, sort of. When you think about guys like Case Keenum and what's the guy down in Mullins? That's
Nick
like
Mullins,
for some reason, I don't know if it's a mental thing where they think, oh, it's just the backup, we don't have to try as hard, or if it's like, not having as much tape on the guy or preparing the same way you would be for the starter. But it does seem like we tend to give unusually higher stats to backup quarterbacks than most other teams do.
Like last year, who was it against the Steelers? We had like 3 games in a row where we played nothing but backups. It was the Steelers, the Panthers, and another team, all backups. It was like Mason Rudolph, whoever the backup was for Cam Newton that one year, and then like another team. It might have been like Nick Mullins again. But that's one thing that I always think about. I was like, man, why do the backups always look good? I mean, this defense, they've played great as of late, but they're not a great defense. So I kind of worry about that. But I do have to say that it was nice knowing that, oh, Russell Wilson's coming out of the game in the fourth quarter, which I can't remember the last time we've actually seen that. I know it's happened, but it's been so long.
I think it was even like the end of the third quarter when they pulled him.
Yeah, I tweeted out there saying, if the Jets score a touchdown, I want Pete Carroll to pull a Bill Belichick and put Russell Wilson back in just to get another touchdown, just to show him. But it was really weird seeing all the starters out, seeing only a few of them play. We got to see extensive look at Geno Smith, who I don't think I've ever seen play as a Seahawk before. It was weird.
It was weird, and that's when it got boring and started to feel like a preseason game.
Yeah, I definitely. It's weird because we didn't have a preseason, so to see the one preseason like instance, it was almost like, oh, do I really have to watch the rest of this quarter? Like, am I going to learn anything? But I mean, they did score, and the tight ends got a bunch of looks, so credit to them.
Yep.
Geno Smith had a better quarterback rating than Sam Darnold in a quarter of play versus 4 quarters of play, and lots of promising stuff, I would say. But with the caveat, it's a winless Jets team, right?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't. It's kind of hard to really. It didn't feel like a blowout so much. I mean, obviously we dominated, but it didn't feel like a 40-3 game to me.
Why do you think that was, that it didn't feel like a blowout? Was it because like they weren't scoring a ton of touchdowns? I mean, Russell Wilson had 4 touchdowns. Chris Carson had a touchdown on the ground. I mean, that's 5 touchdowns.
There was something about it. I think it was just we kind of slowly put those points together, and it wasn't like one of those things where we went on a rampage and just scored 3 touchdowns in a quarter or nothing like. You know what I mean? It didn't feel like, for example, some of those games back in 2012 where we just you know what I mean, just clobbered a couple of opponents. And
I would say that the one thing that I think took away from it feeling like a big blowout was there was no huge, like, quote-unquote explosive plays. So plays that are over, like, 20 yards. Everything was, like, 7 to 20, like, just under 20. Like, even the touchdowns, none of them were, like, on the goal line except for Chris Carson's touchdown run. Everything was like, oh, just jot. I mean, the most perilous touchdown was when the defensive lineman, like, pancaked Damian Lewis and then had Russell Wilson's leg, and Russell just, like, casually, like, steps out of it and then throws, like, a dart to D-Moore for a touchdown. And it was like, okay, like, we're just, like, the most chill ever.
I think that's probably what it was not a lot of big plays, not a lot of flashy plays, just kind of solid offensive football.
Like, even the turnover they had, where they had the fumble on Frank Gore, the oldest man in football, like, that was the most casual thing ever. Like, the refs just, like, whistle, Seahawks ball, and there was, like, no commotion at all. Like, even the announcers on the TV broadcast were like, oh, looks like we have a turnover, and the refs are signaling. It was a very, I would say, almost unnatural game, just because there wasn't that level of excitement or tension that I think we are accustomed to, especially this year. And I wonder if that also impacted the announcers. Like, I definitely felt that they were not into the game at all either.
They were bored.
Because what were they talking about in the fourth quarter? Because there wasn't, you had the backup in for Seattle. The Jets hadn't done anything. They didn't have anything, like, worth talking about. So you started kind of talking about, like, well, you know, what are they going to do with the first round pick, and it was all hypothetical. You weren't even talking about the game anymore. It was almost like baseball, where you kind of, like, talk around the few instances that something actually happens in a baseball game. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, a lot of filler.
Yeah. But yeah, the Seahawks show they can play a full 60-minute game on offense, defense, and special teams as they have their first blowout in a couple of years. The winless Jets stay winless as Seattle runs up 40 points. Jamal Adams very quietly sets an NFL record for sacks by a DB with 3 games left. And now attention turns as Seattle travels east for the last time in the regular season to face another NFC leading team, this time in the Washington football team. Their offense has suffered with a lot of poor quarterback play, but this young defense is thriving, and it could be a huge challenge for our Seahawks. This is the Hawkscast podcast, and Zeb, we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but we kind of already talked about it. But does beating this Jets team in this convincing fashion of 43, it was the biggest blowout of the weekend, make up for that Giants loss 2 weeks ago?
I wouldn't say it makes up for it. I think when you're supposed to be a good football team and you play a team who's struggling as much as the Jets are, this is kind of the outcome you should expect. It's a blowout win, but it's not like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like any, you know, it's what I expected. It's like what you should do if you're a good football team. So losing to the Giants previously is exactly what you shouldn't do if you're a good football team, even though they're not a bad football team. You know, the Seahawks are supposed to be contending for a championship, so they should blow out the Jets, but they should also beat the Giants, even if it is a close game.
Yeah. I think...
Go ahead.
I kind of struggle with this question because you always want to talk about wins, and wins are so hard in this game. But what it comes down to is when there is a tiebreaker involved, losing to an NFC team, which the Giants are, versus losing or winning against an AFC team, the value of those wins, while on the record they look the same, but it comes down to tiebreakers. And I think this loss is the first loss that this Giants loss that I really, really keep coming back to. I keep thinking about what if, and like, why didn't we do this better? And was it Russell Wilson? Was it the coaching? Was it the players? Was it the game plan? Was it execution? And even though we see the Seahawks basically do whatever they wanted on offense and on defense in this game, there's just something about it that just sticks in me, and just think, like, I feel like I'm always going to be thinking about that loss to the Giants. More so than the loss to the Bills, more so than the loss to the Rams or to the Cardinals. Just because the impact is so much greater if we end up tied. Like, let's say for whatever reason we win the tiebreaker over the Rams because we have, a better record, or, we own the tiebreaker over them. If it comes to Green Bay and New Orleans, who we do not play this year, there's not that offset tiebreaker. So it's going to come down to conference games. And I feel like that's really going to hurt Seattle. And that's what makes me think about it. I almost wish that we had beat the Giants and lost to the Jets, just because the Jets win. While it's a win, it's a non-conference game and it has less implications, because it's even less likely that an NFC team also plays the NFC East, because it's just not built that way.
Right, and it doesn't even have any good strength of victory qualities to it. It's
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it literally does nothing but it puts a win in the win column, which is obviously the best part of it. But if we could swap the Jets for the Giants, absolutely.
And I think that's kind of why I keep coming back to that Giants game, because we see how well and how fluid the Seahawks can look. Like, I can't think of anywhere that they struggled. Like, we were talking about in the previous game how many times they maybe would convert on third down, and they were just effortless, And
yeah.
I know we're talking about a winless team that they did it against, but it's still an NFL team. We talk about that all the time. Like, they still get paid. Those guys want to do well, because it's not just about what they can do this year, but it really has impact on what's going to happen to them next year. So I feel as if that opportunity definitely makes a huge difference. And no matter how they beat the Jets, and even though it was this really convincing win, I feel like it is going to haunt us. And I think that's what kind of frustrates me a little bit. I don't know if that's the same way you feel.
I mean, it depends. If we end up 12-4, I don't think it's going to matter at all. I mean, like we've talked about how much seeding is almost, it doesn't matter this year, as opposed to other years.
Right.
So, but yeah, if it comes down to some weird tiebreaker thing where we end up, it turns out badly for us because we weren't able to win that game, then yeah, that would suck.
I think that's like the other thing. The fact that there's not a 2 seed that gets to stay at home. It's just a 1 seed.
Right.
I'm still conflicted about whether or not I like that. I think the NFL, 6 teams, 4 division winners and 2 playoff teams is the best playoff, because you allow 2 really good teams to make it, and that third non-conference winner, they just miss out. I think that's a really good balance, as opposed to other leagues where half the league makes the playoffs. So
yeah, I mean the playoffs, the way the playoffs were set up before this year was pretty much perfect.
Right. And ultimately, I don't think that we're losing a whole lot. I think what will happen is, if they continue with this format and like 8 and 8 teams start making it as like the 7th seed, I think people were like, oh, well, this is dumb. Or like, there might be a year like the NFC East where, the NFC East winner might finish with a sub 500 record still.
Right.
And if you allow that team to into the playoffs, because we see that in the NBA. The NBA notoriously has at least 3 teams with a losing record make the playoffs each year.
Right. Yeah, I don't think the quality of the playoffs is going to go down because of this. There's going to be years where a team gets in that shouldn't have. There's going to be years where it's totally justified, and that team that snuck in as the 7th seed turns into the team to watch for the playoffs, or one of the great games.
Right.
We have firsthand experience of how that kind of thing can work out when people don't think you deserve to be there, and then you put in an all-time great performance, an all-time memorable performance. So I'm honestly, more than anything, just having the extra playoff games is enough for me to be okay with it.
Man, 6 playoff games over 2 days.
It's the best.
It's a lot of fun.
I can't wait.
And I think it'll be really interesting because we've talked about there's not a super obvious home field advantage because a lot of teams don't have players. I mean, the teams in California can't even play in California because of this pandemic we're all dealing with. So could you imagine if that impacts even more teams? Like if their region can't get anything under control and they're just told, sorry guys, you guys can't play at your stadium. Find a new home to play at.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's already been a weird, crazy year. It could just continue to get weirder and crazier.
That is definitely true. And I definitely am. I'm going to be here for it. I think this year in particular, I will enjoy the playoff games even more because I think there's going to be that weird 2-7 matchup where, the 2 seed, whoever they end up being, I feel will have a huge, on paper advantage over a 7 seed because that feels like such a foreign idea to think that a 7 is going to face a 2 in the first round. Usually, it's 4 and 5 and 3 and 6. That's the gap. But now it's 2 and 7. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what that is because no matter who ends up being that 2 seed, they're going to be pissed. They're going to be so upset that they have to play on that opening playoff weekend. Right.
I don't know if when it comes down to it, when they play the games, nobody's going to be thinking about this, but that 2 seed is going to be playing a team who every year before would not have even made it into the playoffs. So, I don't think it's going to matter in a football sense, but it's just, it's kind of interesting to think about it from that perspective.
It is interesting. And, as we get closer, the Seahawks can secure a playoff spot if they win this weekend. A tie could be involved if, I think Minnesota ends up tying or losing their game. That secures the Seahawks a win. So that's rarely going to happen. So Seattle wins, take care of business. They have 3 games to make the playoffs, essentially. So they're in pretty good condition. I think that there are a 99% chance to make the playoffs. And depending on how this game plays out, we have the Rams the following week. That obviously has huge implications on who is going to win the NFC West.
This is where we miss Ross's philosophical insight on how this stuff works.
He's always going to be future prognosticating and the impact and all the things. And he's right. I mean, the players are human. They're gonna think those things. So
exactly.
But let's move on to topic number 2. So topic number 2, we talked about this multiple times on the podcast about how tough our schedule was and then how easy our schedule got. And topic number 2, I want to know, how did this 4-game stretch of Philly, the Giants, the Jets, and Washington all of a sudden become more difficult? They're 2-1 in this stretch, which is obviously a positive, but the Philly game, there was definitely a lot of questions. On the Giants game, the Jets game is kind of a non-factor, but this upcoming Washington game, everything seems more daunting. Even the Giants beforehand, even though everyone predicted that Seattle was going to beat the Giants, everyone's saying they're coming off 3 wins. And I remember saying yeah, they're coming off 3 wins, but it's also 3 bad teams. I'm eating a lot of crow for that. But what happened? What happened? How did these 4 games all of a sudden become, on paper, more difficult than we thought?
Well, I mean, I think it's actually pretty easy to answer, and that's this. But the Giants and the Red Tails, as I'll call them, hoping that'll be their future name.
That's a great name if they get it.
I sure hope so. Those teams have gotten better as the year's gone on. The first half of the season, they both looked pretty trash, but they've really, and especially the Red Tails, have really pulled it together and really look like respectable football teams at this point. And at the same time, the Seahawks have had this weird second half of the season drop off where, they went from being maybe the scariest, or at least one of the scariest teams in the league, to looking like everything's a struggle. So it's not really surprising to see these 4 games become a little bit more difficult. Now, I don't think the Philly game was all that difficult. If they don't get that last kind of lucky Hail Mary touchdown, that game doesn't look nearly as close as it ended up looking. And obviously, we stomped out the Jets with very little problem. But yeah, the Giants game, going into that, is a game we feel like we should have won. Clearly, we didn't. So, hopefully, coming up here against the Red Tails, it'll be not. I'd like to see just better play than we got against the Giants. I still think it's going to be difficult. It wouldn't surprise me if we lose that game, but this is about the point where we'd like to see this team kind of turn it on and start to make that late season push.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And the one thing that we saw over the weekend was Philly made a quarterback change, and they pulled out a huge upset over the Saints. I did not expect a Jalen Hurt team to be leading 17-0 and basically control that game. Did you watch that Philly Saints game?
I didn't get to watch much. There wasn't much. We don't get a lot of games on TV over here for whatever reason. Like usually one afternoon game and one late game.
It was really interesting. So I was watching the game, and so Philly had like a 10-point lead, and New Orleans has the ball. They're basically taking their time. They're not doing a whole lot with it. They go for it on, 4th and long, and I forget what happened, but basically it's a 4-point game or 10-point game. They don't do anything with it. They give the ball back to Philly, and Philly does what any team does. They run the ball to try and squeeze more clock out. The problem is they end up running with their quarterback, and even though he's had a great game running the ball, he's still a quarterback. He's not running into piles. And on the play, he runs up into the middle, gains a few yards, in a pile, gets stood up, and people start just punching the ball out, and then they turn the ball over. And the Saints decide, like, oh, we know how to score now, and they score a touchdown in like 3 plays, and all of a sudden it comes down to an onside kick. Philly recovers, but for the life of me, like, the Saints just weren't in a rush until they got that turnover. So it was a really weird game, and I think if Seattle had to play a running quarterback, like when we played against Kyler Murray the first time, I think it would be a lot different. But yeah, I'm really surprised when we were looking at this game schedule 6-7 weeks ago. These teams looked just awful. And they all got better. Philly's defense looked a lot better. Seattle didn't score a ton of points. They only scored 23. They didn't score anything against the Giants, only 10 points. We killed the Jets, but they were never the concern. And now we have this Washington Red Tails team where their defense is coming on really strong. And I think that it helps with the teams that they've played, but their defenses have all looked legit, which I think is good for Seattle if they want to kind of get that game experience and handle adversity. I don't think Seattle has handled it abundantly well. But if the team is healthy, I think that this is going to be a good run. And if they get out of it 3-1, I will be quite happy. But yeah, I definitely did not anticipate that this 4-game stretch outside of the Jets would look as daunting as it ended up being, or challenging to be, for that matter.
Right. The scary part is that I believe the Washington defense is better than the Giants and the Eagles defense. I think they really seem to be the team that's looking like they're going to pull ahead in that division and take it. They might even, who knows, they might even break 500.
Well, what's interesting is, like, of these 3 teams, all 3 of them are still in the hunt for that NFC East crown. Obviously, Washington is the current leader, but it's still a toss about who's going to win that division, which I think it's not crazy. It's crazy because of just how close they all are. Washington has 6 wins, Giants have 5, Philadelphia has 4, but they have got a tie, so they're only really a game and a half back. Giants are a game back. They still have to play a bunch of people, so there's a lot that can happen. I mean, even technically Dallas, I believe, is still in the fray. You know, at 4-9. Oh no. I'm sorry. Dallas officially got eliminated.
They're out of it.
But yeah, I mean, if Philly wins 3 games and Washington only wins 1 and Giants only win 1, by virtue of that tie, they'll go 7-8-1, and that would put them ahead. And it's not unreasonable for that to happen, I don't think.
No, not at all.
But yeah.
I think the Washington defense looks legit scary right now. They've won 4 in a row. And they're playing the best football of the season for them at this point. So
yeah, they destroyed the Niners. They had two turnovers for touchdowns. They did not score a single offensive touchdown, but they scored 2 defensive ones, and that's all they needed.
Right. Exactly.
You know? And the other thing is, like, you think about that, but not only is that defense taking the ball away and scoring off those plays, those are opportunities that the opposing team is not able to score because their offense is obviously lost the ball. So I do think that is something to talk about, and we will talk about the Red Tails in a little bit. Final thoughts on this 4-game stretch that we all overestimated Seahawks' opportunity and how challenging it would be.
Yeah, so much for that walk in the park, huh?
Yeah, maybe that means that the Rams and Niners are just going to be cakewalks and they'll just like step aside.
I'll take it.
If only that's the way that it worked.
Right.
But speaking about that, that's topic number 3, the Hawks Cast Corner, where we do focus on the NFC West. Is it now time for Seattle to start rooting for the Niners and Cards for the rest of the season to try and help Seattle to push the Rams and make it a little bit harder for them to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. That's the Rams' next 2 opponents.
So the Rams they're playing the Jets this weekend, at Seattle, and then Arizona. So Arizona is the last game that the Rams will play. So it's really only Arizona that can help us out if they can get a win on week 17. There's not a lot of hope for the Jets. Seattle has to win.
Not really.
But yeah. I mean, I would love, if there's one team that the Jets are going to get a win with, I would love for it to be the Rams, and for like Jared Goff to just have a bad game and just for everyone to question their decisions.
It would be hilarious. I don't know that the Jets have, you know, not to question the players individually or anything, but that team right now as a whole just doesn't seem like they have a lot of heart, and I think it'd be a pretty tough hill to climb for them to beat a Rams team that's actually looking pretty good right now.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we want to win and we want to control our own destiny in that, and we do at this point, if we're able to win out. But any extra help anybody's willing to give us, I'm willing to take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic, my enemy's enemy is my friend. In this case, our friend is the Cardinals and the New York Jets, so I will take any help that we can get. Obviously, if Seattle wins out, that means that we will be equal to the Rams, and even if the Rams win, because we're tied right now, we by virtue have the game advantage. So that would be one thing. But yeah, it's interesting that this is something that always happens when you're not the clear front runner. You're always asking for help. You're always asking, hey, can this team get a win? Can we trust this team to help out my team? Like when the Eagles beat the Saints, that's great, but we don't really benefit because we're still a game back. It's really the Packers that end up benefiting because of that. So we need extra help if we want to talk about the 1 seed, which theoretically is possible, but it's a lot more help.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we need a couple of teams to lose a couple of games, and you know you can't really count on that, especially when they're teams like the Packers and the Saints who are where they're at for a reason. So, you know, as Seahawks fans, we've had a lot of years as long-time Seahawks fans. We know what it's like to have those years whereby week, 13, 14, the playoffs are pretty much off the table, but the things have changed. The last 20 years now, we're a team that is used to looking at playoff scenarios at this point in the season. So we've had those few where we are the top dog and it doesn't really matter what anybody else does, but most of the time it's seeding and it's an issue and it's trying to play home games, and it's kind of fun to look around the league and see who you need to lose or who you can root for.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes you end up rooting for teams that you typically wouldn't, and vice versa. So it's fun. I enjoy this part of it. I'd rather be 13-0 and not having to worry about it. But
right,
this is the alternative. I'm not mad about it. I enjoy this part.
I distinctly, the last time I remember being like actually upset that none of the larger NFL media was talking about the Seahawks' chance to make the playoffs. This was the T-Jack year, so this is, what's that, 2011. So yeah. His 1 year at the helm. And I remember we were, I want to say 7-7 at that time, or something close to that. We didn't finish strong that year, but we ended up 7-9. And the path for Seattle to make the playoffs had a lot of help. We needed like 5 teams to lose, all in very specific ways in the last 2 weeks, in order for us to have like the weird tiebreaker to make it as like the 6th seed. And I remember, why isn't anyone talking about Seattle's chances? This is totally unreasonable. So that's the last time I remember really thinking like, you know what? I'd rather be in the other position where we're talking about, okay, we just need to handle our business and we'll get into the playoffs. And then there's other things to shoot for, such as the division, such as a higher seed. But yeah, it's interesting that this is the case. Not only are we talking about where we're going to end up in the playoffs, but right now we're kind of gunning for that 5 seed. I feel like it's the division or the 5 seed. And if that's the case, it would be a rematch with the NFC East, a division that we've already faced with the last game here coming up against the Washington football team.
Yeah, that might be the exact matchup we don't want, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. But that does bring us to topic number 4 for the evening, the Washington football team. It's weird to think about it that way because I'm in Seattle, Washington. When I think about Washington football, I think about the University of Washington Huskies, the college team in the Pac-12. Yeah. I don't think about the team formerly known as, the other team. Their colors are still the same, but they've just their logo is now a W. So credit for them for being more socially aware about their name and the connotation. But I hope they get a real name soon, because calling them the Washington football team in the state of Washington is very confusing.
Yeah. I can't. I don't know how many people I've run across that really thought throughout my life that the Washington football team was from the state of Washington. People that aren't paying close attention, you know what I mean?
Oh, like when I first started watching football, I was like, oh yeah, this team, oh, they must be from the state, so I'm going to root for them. They won a couple Super Bowls when I was a kid, so I was like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So little did I know. But Zeb, we've talked about it. We've talked about it already. It's like, should the Seahawks and Seattle be scared? This is a top 5 defense. They're 4th in yards, 3rd in passing yards, 9th in rush defense, and 6th in points. So the only defensive category that Seattle is better than, and this is again for the whole year, not just recently, we have a better rush defense. Seattle's 27th in yards. We're 32nd in passing yards. We're 4th in rush defense, and we're 18th in points against. So our defense collectively for the year versus this Washington defense, they have a huge edge. Should our offensive line be worried about this potential matchup?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at those rankings like that, it kind of looks like a real lopsided situation we're going into. But, we know this team. We know this team has the ability to play at a high level. I haven't gotten to watch much Washington football this year, but they are clearly doing something right. And that Chase Young sure seems to be turning it on at the right time as well. He looks almost like Jadeveon Clowney doing it the right way to me. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I'm not concerned about this game. This is one of those games where we need to see the Russell that we haven't seen now in some weeks. The Russell that we know can turn it on and dominate. We need to see a good game plan. We need to see some balance. We need to be able to run the ball and play some smash mouth football. And it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be 40-3. I'll tell you that much. But I'm looking forward to the matchup. And again, they don't have a great offense over there in Washington. So
no, their offense is quite awful. I mean, if you look at their offense, not only is it limited by the fact that they've played 3 different quarterbacks, 1 was benched, 2 have been injured. There is not a clear-cut starter for this game coming up, and this is why I mentioned, like, I'm always concerned when Seattle plays a backup, and in this case, their entire quarterback roster is nothing but backups.
Just all backups.
Yeah, it's Alex Smith, Dwayne Allen, and Dwayne Haskins. I forget. I don't know about the Allen. I know it's Allen is his name, but I don't know if I have the first name.
Is it Kyle or Josh?
Kyle or Josh Allen. Yeah. I think that's right.
One of the two. I feel like this is a good opportunity for our defense to kind of to turn it on and have a really good game. So, and I think we're going to need them to. I think in order to win this game, our defense is going to have to step up and make some game-changing plays. So hopefully we'll get to see some of that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you worry about. As bad as their offense is, our defense is not great. So is that something that they can exploit, just like the Giants did? Because the Giants didn't do a whole lot offensively, but they did enough. They scored 17 points. And that was obviously the difference in the game. But I am, for the first time this year, looking at an opposing defense and looking and seeing what they've done and what they can do. And I'm worried because I don't know how good our offensive line is in this matchup. I feel like we are less of a power team when it comes to facing that kind of a defensive onslaught, that we're not able to just push our will and just do whatever we want. We're a little bit more finesse. We're a little bit more touch. Because if they don't give Chris Carson the ball 20 plus times in the game, I don't know if we're going to have that physicality we would really need to excel.
Yeah. Our offensive line has been interesting this year. I think we're kind of lucky because of the injury situation, but this is one of the more solid offensive lines that we've had in recent years. And with really good depth, we haven't had much problem with guys coming off the bench and stepping in and playing well. So it's going to be a challenge, but I don't know that that's necessarily the biggest thing that I'm worried about. I'm definitely just more worried about Russell and our ability to move the ball. If the Red Tails go too high safeties on us, we know Russell's going to struggle. So we're going to need, we're going to need some guys to step up and make some big plays, and I think that's probably going to have to happen on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's interesting that is like the one thing that causes such a problem, because I think what it does is the too high safety takes away the idea and the opportunity for them to go deep and exploit the talent that is DK Metcalf. I'm hoping that the game we saw in the Jets, where they were willing to give up those underneath routes, because DK ended up with 6 catches, 61 yards, but he had a touchdown. It was a great touchdown. There's his cone drill was on highlight in that play. And
his hand catch.
Yeah. And Tyler Lockett, he had 5 catches, all 5 targets he caught, and he caught him for like 55 yards. A quiet day for him. And also it was kind of a blowout, so they didn't need to just like dominate and impose their will. But I'm hoping that game where Seattle was taking the underneath, they were taking those 7 to 10 yard routes, and Russ wasn't trying to go for the 30-yard bombs like he can. If that's what the Red Tails offer up, I hope that's what they're willing to take.
Yeah, absolutely. We all love the big the big plays, but they kind of haven't been there recently, and it's frustrating to see them pass up on gains just because it's not as much as he's looking for or whatever. So
yeah,
if there's underneath stuff, by all means take it.
And I think that was also indicative of that turnover that Russ had. So the replays and all the people showed Russ just missed that there was that high safety, but he had Will Dissly like by himself, totally uncovered for an easy 10 to 20 yard play, probably closer to 15 to 20 yards, because
we're talking about the interception just last week. The interception,
yes.
Which was a great defensive play. Even
it was
more
a great play, and if I'm gonna critique anything outside of Russell Wilson's decision to make that throw, was DK needs to turn into a defensive back in that play and like break it up.
But he clearly didn't think that the DB had a shot at it, so he reached behind him like the ball was gonna make it through, but the DB was like, "No, sir.
Yeah,
I'm taking this one."
So I'm hoping that is the difference that we see. We see the commitment to the run. We see the commitment to use play action. We see the commitment to take the 5, 7, 10 yard plays when they're there. And then once we are comfortable and we feel like everyone's creeping up, then we try and go over the top with Tyler Lockett or DK. But I am concerned because this defense looks really good. The offense, though, I'm not really worried about that offense because they don't even know who their running back is going to be. Their main guy, he's been banged up. Gibson is the dude. He hasn't played, but former Seahawk, former Detroit Lions, J.D. McKissick is their starting guy, and I'm not too worried about that offense because I feel like Seattle's defense is playing well enough, but I'm not sure if our edge is enough if we don't play well, if we can't execute what we want to do. And I think that's my concern.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
If there was one play to open things up, what would you like to see? Would you like to see the Seahawks offense do something great, or would you like to see the Seahawks defense or special teams do something great? If you had to pick like a marquee play in the first quarter that kind of like opens everything up, what would you like to see?
Well, I mean, in a game like this, it sure would feel great to see the offense put together a great game and score some points and look more competent than they have as of late. Not, last weekend notwithstanding, but I mean, that's ever since things have slowed down. That's kind of been what I've been hoping for. Was like, I want to see that spark back. I want to see that. I want this offense to look scary. I think that's our best shot to win in the playoffs, is for this offense to be clicking.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. If I had to choose between the offense or defense, putting on just like whatever they can do in the first few series, if the offense can just like matriculate down the field, they don't even have to get like huge chunk plays, but if they're just churning first downs after first down after first down on whatever play, on whatever they can do, I think that will bode better for the rest of the game than if the defense starts strong. Because we saw what happened when the defense starts strong. The offense can't seem to get anything, and we're just kind of like hoping, waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, right, exactly. To clarify, I would love to see the offense do that. I think we're going to need the defense to do it.
I think that's the thing, and I think that's the one reason why maybe the Seahawks defense does so poorly against backups. They're backups for a reason, but they also know their role, and the role is not to make mistakes and not to turn the ball over. Like for them, taking a sack is the smarter play than just chucking the ball up. And because of their position, because of the position that they're a backup, they have less of a leash to work off of. So my thought is that that's maybe why Seattle does so poorly. They backups are going to play a little bit more sound and like do exactly what the coaches want them to do.
I think you're right. Way to bring it full circle.
But yeah, we'll see. But I'm looking forward to this game. I think it'll be fun. It's a 10 a.m. game, so it's the last early game we'll have to wake up for before the playoffs start. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, and there's still a lot of things that are unknown. A couple injuries on both teams, but for the most part, I think Seattle's going to go into the game pretty healthy. I think Brandon Shell is the one question mark. I don't know if he practiced today or not. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't know. I know Olsen's been out there practicing again.
Yeah, I definitely did not think a guy that broke his foot would come back to return, but credit to him. The Seahawks and the coaches were saying like, yeah, we thought this guy would just pack it in, being as old as he is, but he wants to come back. So
he obviously loves playing.
Yeah, I mean, credit that guy for sure.
Yep.
Final thoughts on the Red Tails coming up into this game?
Yeah, I expect a frustrating game that I think we can win, but I think it's going to be one of those hard-fought ones that comes down to whatever happens at the end.
If it's hard-fought and we win, I'll take it.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
I mean, if it's hard-fought and we lose, I'll take it, as long as it's not some bullshit where it just looks like, why are we playing like this? Like, yeah. if we play hard, we play with heart, and it looks like the guys are giving it their all, and things just don't go our way, I won't be, I'll be disappointed, but it won't be as bad.
I think the best way you can tell how the Seahawks are doing, if you were just to go by Seahawks Twitter would just be, they were just silence, because that's when you can tell that Seahawks are doing well and there's like nothing for them to complain about.
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, we won and we won well, so I guess I'll just shut my Twitter.
Seahawks Twitter sucks. That Evan dude sucks. Is Ben Baldwin, is he Seahawks Twitter? He sucks.
Yeah, he's the analytical guy for The Athletic. Evan, what's his name? He has bad food takes, and he's like kind of like, he's the classic, things aren't good enough now, so everything's got to go.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't think he has any idea what the hell he's talking about most of the time.
I think it's the classic case where there's nothing preventing you from wishing the worst thing or being super hyperbolic and just like wishing the worst upon whoever, because you have no control, you have no say. So you might as well be a jerk about it. You might as well try and get the most out of it, because that's how you get attention. That's how you get people to respond. And in Twitter, there's no bad press.
Exactly.
Which is obviously like the worst aspect of like social media, but that's the way it is.
Exactly.
The worse your takes are, the more people are going to be upset, the more they're going to respond, and you just like, you feed off of it.
Bingo.
So really what that means is we need to ramp up our game. We need to start talking about how many people we can fire on the next podcast.
It's time for Pete Carroll to go.
It's time to cut Russell Wilson.
Yeah, bring in Dave Wannstedt and Fitz Magic.
Yeah, that's what
we're starting over.
We need to bring in Adrian Peterson. He's good, right? Whatever it takes, trade for him.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to some predictions. As we always do, we're going to predict a final score. On behalf of Ross, we're going to give him. What should we give Ross's prediction? His final score.
Ross is going to say 23-19.
He's going to give some like all prime number results. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your prediction for this game?
Looking for a scoregami here. I'm going to say 25-18.
25-18. That's a nice score.
Scoregami or not, but
Tony chiming in on the chat saying 17-21. He put the 17 first. Is that a Seahawk loss that Tony's predicting?
That's what it sounds like.
It sounds like it. Yeah. I think this is going to be a close game. I want to offer up some commendations to the Seahawks. I predicted a 14-0 win for the Seahawks. They did me much better with a 40-3, so I'm going to give them a little bit more respect. I'm going to think it's a little bit lower scoring, but I'm going to go 15-21 Seahawks. It's a one-score game, but we enough. Tony's saying the Seahawks do win, so thank you, Tony. Zeb, who's going to start for the Red Tails? Is it going to be Dwayne Haskins or Alex Smith? Alex Smith did not practice today.
He's got a calf thing, right?
He got a calf thing. I mean, the fact that he has a leg today is the miracle, apparently.
Is it on that same leg?
I don't know. I know he has a leg that has a calf injury.
If he's got a calf thing on that same leg, I'm definitely going Haskins.
Yeah. I'm looking at Haskins. I'm looking at his record. I'm looking at his stats for the year. Dude got benched for a reason. He was a first-round pick, 15th overall out of Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State produces good quarterbacks. Great defensive players, not the best quarterback. For me, I think that they will do better with Alex Smith. Haskins is not a mobile guy. He's less athletic than Alex Smith is. He's slower. So I think Haskins does start, but I think for their team, they would do much better if it was Alex Smith in the game. Which RB is going to start for the Red Tails? Is it J.D. McKissick or Gibson?
My man, Jonathan David McKissick.
I actually don't know the injury report on Gibson. I just knew that he wasn't starting, so I'm going to also go with McKissick as well. I thought he's the one thing I remember about JD is he was in that one crazy Seahawk year where Russell Wilson scored all of the touchdowns. JD McKissick had the one non-Russell Wilson touchdown that year.
That was the only touchdown that wasn't from Russell Wilson.
Yeah, because Russell Wilson, we had no rushing touchdowns because we didn't have anyone to run the ball. So J.D. McKissick had one draw play for a touchdown. It was like a 20-yard touchdown, I want to say.
Against the Colts too, huh?
Yeah, but everything else was a passing touchdown or Russell Wilson ran the ball because we had no one to run the ball for us that year.
Yeah, that was rough.
So who's going to have more receiving yards? Is it going to be DK Metcalf or also 2019 draftee Taylor Lauren? Taylor Lauren was drafted in the 3rd round, a couple spots behind DK Metcalf. Who do you think is going to have the better game?
McLaurin, right?
Terry Lauren is the wide receiver.
Terry McLaurin, yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so. I don't know. Is it a McLaurin?
Yeah, McLaurin. Terry McLaurin.
All right, Terry McLaurin. Sorry.
I always remember him because it sounds like McLaren, like a really fast car.
Nice.
I don't know. Let's go. I'll say Metcalf for the sake of being a homer.
I think that's a fair bet. Statistically, this year, McLaurin he has more targets and he has 4 more receptions, but he has less touchdowns, less yards, less per average. I'm going to go with Metcalf. I think he's had the better year. I think that last game, he showed that he doesn't have to be a boom or bust kind of guy. He can be someone that you can just kind of feed. So I think Metcalf is going to be. Who's going to get more touches, Chris Carson or Carlos Hyde? Carlos Hyde had more carries in the game, but Chris Carson had 5 more passes thrown his way. Who's going to get more touches?
I'll go Carson.
Yeah, I think Carson has gotten healthier and healthier. He had just beautiful runs in the game against the Jets, and I hope that he gets more touches because I think that he's the one that really makes the Seahawks a lot more dynamic. I think it also opens things up for Hyde as well.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to see more targets? Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf? Lockett had 5 targets, caught all 5. DK had 8 targets, caught 6 of 8.
Yeah, I'll go DK.
I think that while Metcalf is going to have a better game against McLaurin, I think Tyler Lockett is going to see a little bit more attention because I feel like more teams want to stop Metcalf than they do Lockett, and I hope that Russ will continue to find the guys underneath, and that's something that Lockett's really good at.
That's true.
Speaking of the underneath, who's going to get more targets, Seattle running backs or Seattle tight ends? So, interesting note, I actually looked this up in the previous game. It's a little bit skewed because of Geno Smith, but it was 5 targets to Carson. Hyde didn't get any targets, and it was 5 targets to tight ends, but 2 went to Disley, 1 went to McAllister, and then 2 went to Colby, the new guy. I forget his last name.
Parkinson.
So Geno found Colby Parkinson and Hollister for 3 additional targets.
Okay. Yeah. I think it'll probably be close again. It's going to be a toss-up. I'll go running backs.
I'm going to go with the tight ends. I feel like they need to get Will Disley involved in the game a little bit. I think he's had a really quiet year. I think it's been really promising. He got a 2nd touchdown on a really nice play action. But I think the tight ends need to make their presence known a little bit more, and I think that will open things up a lot. And the final prediction for the evening, yes or no, if Seattle gets the number 5 seed, do they face to return Washington again? Do you think that Washington's going to win the NFC East?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think that they're playing their defense is what it is. Their defense is really making me think that that's why they're going to pull ahead more so than any of these other teams.
Yeah, I mean they're looking like the team that's going to take that division, in my opinion.
But that offense, it's just so questionable.
If Smith can stay healthy, I think that's probably the key.
That's the key, right? Alex Smith, a veteran quarterback, not going to turn the ball over. It's going to do just enough. Just take what the defense gives him. But yeah,
smart quarterback play.
The ultimate game manager. They used to be
coach on the field.
The current day derogatory term, but ultimately kind of what you want in your quarterback.
Exactly.
But that means that your other components of the team do well enough, and he just doesn't lose you the game, right?
Yep.
Like, you'll kick the 7 field goals that it takes because your defense is going to limit the other team to 15 points.
Yeah.
But yeah. And that is the podcast of the day. Zeb, final thoughts before we get some shout-outs in.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing this team grab this season by the horns and become the playoff contender that we are that we expected them to be.
Yeah, I think that this is the setting. This game is going to set the tone for the last 3 games. Washington, LA, and then San Francisco. That's really going to set up what we're going to look like heading into the playoffs. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. I'd much rather be 10-4 than 9-5.
Definitely. Time for some shout-outs.
Shout out to whoever stole my Amazon package yesterday. That's real sweet.
Oh, that sucks. Anything great? Anything that you really are missing?
No, it wasn't even that big of a deal. I just moved into a new apartment, and to know that somebody inside of my building, because we have keyed entry, is stealing packages from the mail area. That's pretty awesome.
There's no security cam that you can start snitching on your neighbors?
There's not, and I need to I want to address it, but I feel like if it hasn't been done to this point, they're not going to do it.
Just say, like, hey, I'm the new guy. I have a couple of demands.
Yeah. I'll just take a shit right in the middle of the locker store.
I got a couple packages for you guys to steal next time. Yeah. Shout out to Tony for chiming in on the chat.
What up, Tony?
Shout out to Boy Scout for lurking earlier in the day. Shout out to Ross. Ross is the happiest place on earth right now, but Japan style. So shout out to him.
Did they build a Galaxy's Edge over there?
They should, because if they do, that Disneyland will be at least open before the America one will. So that's a positive. So I would go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So shout out to the gentleman across from me, across this internet mic of Zeb. As always, I'm Sam. With me is Zeb. Usually Ross is here. We're the Hawkscast Podcast. Check us out at hawkscast.com. Seahawks Podcast on Twitter. Seahawks Forum on Twitter. Follow us. Our names are on the board. Follow us. We love you. And we wish you a Go Hawks.
Go Hawks!